An attack inside a place of worship, the killing of 5 people in a Jerusalem synagogue, deepens divisions between Israelis and Palestinians. In a city already facing tensions over its holiest site. What does this mean for the peace process, and what needs to be done to end the violence? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Jane Dutton. There hasn't been an attack like this in Jerusalem in nearly 6 years. 2 Palestinians walked into a synagogue in the western part of the city and attacked people with a gun and a meat cleaver. 4 rabbis and a policeman were killed before the attackers were shot dead. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has promised a harsh response, saying he's determined to win what he calls the battle for Jerusalem. The attack comes against the backdrop of a conflict over the Haram al-Sharif site, known to Jews as Temple Mount. Both sides blame each other for the worsening situation. Netanyahu accuses Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas of incitement, while Abbas says Israel is stirring religious tensions and must end provocations, especially surrounding Jerusalem shrines. So will Israel's measures to prevent further attacks help or hurt an already volatile situation? And could the growing focus on the Al-Aqsa Mosque complicate this decades-long conflict that seems far from being resolved? Al Jazeera's Stephanie Decker is in East Jerusalem, near a home that Israel destroyed as punishment for a previous attack. She sent us this update.
We're in Silwan, a neighbourhood of occupied East Jerusalem, and we've seen now behind us that 4th floor apartment, an example of this demolition policy that the Israeli government had said it would carry out on the perpetrators of attacks against Israelis. The man who lived here was a man who rammed his car into a gathering of people in West Jerusalem, killing 1 woman and a 3-month-old baby. Now, people here in this neighborhood will tell you that it's a form of collective punishment. The perpetrator was killed at the scene. They say, why is Israel now targeting his family home? But the narrative from the Israeli government, we heard from the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, is that this acts as a deterrent. They have said they'll come down hard on anyone that carries out attacks against Israelis, and when the demolition happens of any relative family home, this should act as a deterrent. So they think that this is a successful policy. We've also heard that the government has approved the demolition of the homes of the 2 men responsible for the attack on the synagogue on Tuesday. That's going to happen in the next couple of days. We don't know specifically when, but that process is underway. But again, it translates to divisions on the ground. Like anything, this is a conflict that has 2 sides. The Israeli government thinks this policy will deter, but the Palestinians here will tell you it only inflames things further. It's a very tense situation here at the moment.
Let's bring in our guests straight away. Joining us from London, Amjad Salfiti, human rights lawyer and head of the UK chapter of the Arab Organization for Human Rights in Jerusalem. Gil Hoffman, chief political correspondent for the Jerusalem Post, and also in London, Toby Cadman, barrister at 9 Bedford Row and international criminal law specialist. Welcome to all 3 of you, gentlemen. Thank you for joining us on Inside Story. Amjad Salfiti, I mean, you as a Palestinian, an advisor to the Palestinian Authority, what do you make of the fact that your fellow Palestinians went into a synagogue and did this?
Well, it's not exactly an act that can be endorsed. However, one has to appreciate that this has come after a lot of tolerance by civilian population who are unarmed, unprotected, and totally neglected by the international community. It came as a response. Again, I repeat, it's not one that we can condone or endorse. However, it seems to me that having suffered so much at the hands of the Israelis, brutality by the Israeli occupying forces, also by the settlers, and having had no other option but to stand up and resist. Some, and obviously these are the exception to the exception, have opted out to carry on such an attack on a holy and sacred place. However, given the proportionality of what the Israelis have been doing to the Palestinians, over the last at least 3-4 months, and not forgetting what they've done in Gaza, one can only understand the reasons behind such a reaction by a few and by minority youth of Palestinian occupants of Jerusalem.
Gil Hoffman, going back to what happened in the synagogue, how as an Israeli did that make you feel? And as a journalist, what are your thoughts about what happened?
I can't understand how anyone can justify that act against anyone. Taking a gun and axes and going into a house of prayer and slaughtering people. I don't understand how anyone of any nationality could do that to anyone, and there can be no justification for that in any kind of way. And we in Jerusalem would hope that there would be Palestinians that would say the same thing I just said.
Amjad, is that what you were doing? Were you justifying what happened because of the way Palestinians are treated? Is that true?
Absolutely not. I did qualify my statement. I wasn't endorsing the act. It is, as I said, the exception to the exception. This is not how the Palestinians are used to resisting occupation. However, I think what the Israelis have done is left such unarmed Palestinians in a hopeless situation to and to push them towards such extremist acts. But compared with what the Israeli settlers are doing in Jerusalem, the Palestinians are still sort of self-restraining themselves, and I hope they'll continue to do so. But I think what we should focus on is what is the reason and what is provoking the civilian population in Jerusalem, the Arab civilian population, the Palestinian civil population, into sort of resorting to such extremism. But I can immediately give you a response, is that it's a hopeless situation. They have waited and waited for international intervention. They have expected an even-handed approach by Israel and the Western powers. None has been forthcoming. They are under attack. They are living under siege. They are surrounded by security fence. They are not allowed. They're not allowed to visit Al-Aqsa, which is the third holiest shrine for Islam. They've got to get permits to get there. People of certain ages cannot even worship. They cannot visit their relatives in the suburbs of Jerusalem. Yet the Israelis in Jerusalem are enjoying an occupied city as if it is their own. Indeed, they have annexed Jerusalem, contrary to the international community's wish and contrary to a very specific Security Council resolution telling Israel to persist from actually using or treating Eastern Jerusalem as part of United Jerusalem.
You lay out many factors there about why you think this sort of action might be happening. And the Prime Minister Netanyahu has condemned the attack and promised to act forcibly to enforce new security measures. But he has warned against vigilante justice.
As a nation, we will settle the score with every terrorist. We've proved we will do so. But no one must take the law into their own hands, even if spirits are riled and blood is boiling. We're in a long campaign, in a war against terrorism that hasn't started today. We always overcame it in the past, and we will this time as well. There are some who want to uproot us from our state and capital. They will not succeed. We're in a battle over Jerusalem, our eternal capital.
Israel has promised to respond to the attack inside the synagogue with a heavy hand. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who was talking there, says he'll destroy the homes of those involved in attacks against Israelis. And he's speeding up the demolition of houses belonging to people involved in previous attacks. The extended family members of the attackers have also been arrested. And security on the streets of Jerusalem has been increased quite dramatically, I must say. There's also the possibility that firearms restrictions for Jerusalem residents could be relaxed. Toby Cadman, is any of this legal?
Well, look, I think first of all, we've got to look at what both sides are saying. And of course, this particular attack on the synagogue is horrific, and I don't think anyone can condone that. But as we've heard, we've got to also look at the context under which this is unfolding. I don't think anyone can condone such action, but at the same time, the Palestinian people are incredibly frustrated in that there is no response from the international community in relation to what we saw during Operation Protective Edge. One of the very serious concerns is when there is this collective punishment which is carried out, demolishing homes. I mean, it's very difficult to see how that can be justified in any circumstances when the perpetrators have been shot dead, that they're not going to be put on trial. They can't be put on trial, but their families' houses are demolished. I've made it quite clear before that this is not justified under international law. It may be justified under Israeli law, but it certainly has no justification under international law, and it cannot be accepted in any system that considers itself to operate under the rule of law.
Gil, why has Israel resorted to this sort of measure? Is this what Israelis want to see? Does this satisfy them?
Look, Israelis want to live in peace with their Palestinian neighbors. And so what Netanyahu did when there started being a spate of Palestinian violence against Jews, he went to Amman, Jordan. He met with John Kerry. Abbas was there. He wanted to meet with him
excuse
too.
me
Abbas
jumping in
wasn't
here. We
willing to
will
meet
talk
with
about
him.
that a little bit later on, but I'm asking you now about this collective punishment, the razing of Palestinians' homes.
But that's
how is Israel justifying that?
You asked what the people of Israel want. And what the people of Israel want, according to the polls, is to respond to the Palestinian violence by having peace talks. That's what the polls say. Regarding destroying the homes of the perpetrators of the attack, that's something that's done as a deterrent that only happens when it's been approved by the Israeli courts. This incident of the driver that rammed his car into a 3-month-old American baby, Israelis might have hoped that there would be punishment against this perpetrator immediately. But no, it sat in the Israeli courts and there were appeals. And the Israeli courts are a model for courts around the world that really respect the Israeli courts in the United States and all over. Legal students around the world read about Israeli courts in textbooks.
Okay, let me pick up.
We very much have the rule of law here that's respected around the world.
Okay, it was an Israeli court ruling that stopped the sort of collective punishment, the razing of Palestinians' homes, only to be reinstated. Why do you think it's been reinstated?
Look, right now, I see Netanyahu desperately trying to do the bare minimum that he can in order to try to restore deterrence. He said yesterday, he was asked, and he answered, I just want whatever terrorist there is to have in mind before he would perpetrate such an attack that he would be harming his own family. Now, apparently it's not much of a deterrent because the terrorist who committed the crime yesterday had 3 children and he's leaving them as orphans, and his wife is a widow, and his family was quite happy and proud of him for what he did. And so maybe this isn't a deterrent. Maybe there has to be more pressure from the international community on the Palestinian leadership to stop their people from...
Sorry, let's bring in Amjad here. You are from East Jerusalem, I believe. You've witnessed the sort of collective punishment. Does it provide a deterrent? I mean, I believe one of the reasons that the court ruled against this action was because the army, the Israeli army, said, in fact, it exacerbates violence, it leads to more violence. What's your view on that?
Indeed, there is a committee finding. It's headed by one of the Israeli army's generals, and Mofaz had actually, as a result of the findings, had reversed the policy and walked away from the demolishing of homes. Not only demolishing of homes, that is one form of collective punishment, but also collective and mass arrests and if you like, curfews on the movement of a certain family within the borders of Jerusalem, their own city. This has been adopted over and over, and there is evidence that it is counterproductive. Not only that it is counterproductive, it really sort of targets the innocents. And you can imagine if 3 persons were involved on the attack on the synagogue, the population, the Arabic Palestinian population of Jerusalem, is in the hundreds of thousands. All of these have to be, if you like, subdued or be the subject of extremist type of policies, which Israel is adopting and knows that is affecting a wider, much wider strata or class of population, and accordingly Israel is knowing that it is applying collective punishment and trying to exert pressure on Palestinians to give up. And I don't know what they're expecting them to give up. To give up the right to worship in Al-Aqsa Mosque, the right to move and visit friends, the right to jobs, the right not to be discriminated against. And one has to appreciate that the Palestinians in Jerusalem suffer most of all under occupation because they're not protected or not under at least the recent peace accords and are not governed by what is given to the Palestinian National Authority.
Okay, let me
so
throw this to Toby.
Left in isolation without protection.
Excuse me, jumping in there. Toby, you would think that Israel would know by now, but that these sort of policies create a more angry and aggressive population, and yet Israel continues with the settlements, for example, with this kind of collective punishment. You say it's illegal. Who's going to pull up Israel on this?
Well, I mean, this is the difficulty, and you know, we've heard the statement that Israeli courts are respected around the world. We've even heard that the IDF is the most moral army in the world. I mean, Israel is not immune from criticism. There has to be a process of accountability. Those who are responsible need to be held accountable. What we would hope is that the Palestinian Authority ratifies the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court, so these matters can go before the International Criminal Court. Israel continues to flout its responsibilities under international law, whether we are dealing with settlements, occupation, and even on a much lower level, the raising of the properties of families of accused. I mean, there's such a complete disregard for international law that the international community cannot afford to just sit by and do nothing. The peace process is not advancing. Our guest in Jerusalem said that that's what the Israeli people want. You would hope that that is what they want, a functional Palestine and a functional Israel. There needs to be a return to a two-state solution. But this continuous targeting, discriminatory targeting of Palestinians is not contributing to this. It's aggravating the situation, and the international community needs to wake up to that reality.
Okay, Gil, with the increase now in violence leveled against Israelis, but not group violence, I mean more individual violence, that is something new, and that must be pretty petrifying for Israelis, the fact that there is no group that you can blame this on, but individuals who can go into their kitchen, pick up a knife and cause this type of random violence.
Absolutely. It's very frightening and frustrating here living in Jerusalem that we can't be safe anywhere. That's what terror does. And that's why the way I reacted to it was taking my children to a festival in Jerusalem that wasn't canceled in order to show the terrorists that life goes on. I want to talk about international law because we experienced a war this summer where the Hamas fired indiscriminately. That's a war crime. Fired at civilians, which is a war crime. Using their people as human shields is a war crime. Using children as fighters and as terror tunnel diggers is a war crime. Using a hospital as a military base is a war crime. And trying to kidnap Israelis is a war crime. So the situation is intolerable, and we hope that there will be peace talks that will change this. That's what we hoped would happen after the end of the war in Gaza. Instead, Abbas went in a different direction.
Well, I do think it's fair to say that both sides were accused of committing war crimes in the latest invasion. But let's get a little bit more detail on the Al-Aqsa compound, where all of this has been happening of late. It houses the mosque, which is the third holiest site in Islam. It sits on Temple Mount, which is one of the holiest sites in Judaism. Israel says the area belongs to it, but under previous agreements, the government of Jordan oversees and looks after the site. Muslims are allowed to enter and pray at Al-Aqsa. On occasion, Israeli police limit access and only allow women and Muslim men over the age of 50 to enter. Recently, there's been a campaign by Jewish activists to be allowed to pray inside the compound, and that has triggered protests and violence at the site. Is this what Israelis are bracing themselves for, Gil? Are they preparing to start praying on the mount? Is that what we're going to see next?
No. No, the chance of Jews being allowed to pray in the Temple Mount anytime soon is zero. The Israeli government has a policy of discrimination. I think maybe all three panelists would agree on that. But the policy of discrimination is against Jews. Muslims can go to the holiest site in Judaism, not one of the holiest sites, the holiest site in Judaism, the place where King Solomon's temple was, and pray. Jews cannot. That is the rule in Israel. And that will continue to be the rule. There's no danger whatsoever of the rule changing. Netanyahu has said it over and over and over again, and yet the Palestinian leadership continues to pretend that it's going to change. And then the family of the member of the murderers from yesterday, they said that's why they went and did this crime, because they heard that Israel was going to let Jews pray up there. Well, they're not. And the Palestinian leadership needs to tell their people it's not going to happen and stop people from dying. That's what will make things better.
Amjad, both sides are talking about a religious war here. Is this what's been set up at the moment, regardless of who's behind this? And who do you think might be behind what's happening?
Well, I fear that it may be leading to a sectarian war, whilst the Israeli government, who has the overall responsibility as the occupying force, is watching, and they know that the Jewish settlers and Jewish zealous groups have got the upper hand. They are armed, they are capable of provocative actions. They walk into the Al-Aqsa Mosque. I didn't see many Muslims going into the Wailing Wall, for example. All what we could see on media, and that's international media, including Israeli media, is that Israeli politicians and Israeli settlers walking into Al-Aqsa Mosque, which to many Muslims is an action that should not happen. This is a sacred site. Jews are not allowed to actually pray there. They've got their section of the Temple Mount. The Wailing Wall is exclusive to Jews, and accordingly it's an act of provocation that is being encouraged, not only overlooked by the Israeli government. And I think the most recent statement by Netanyahu is very clear. This is the battle over Jerusalem. It's as if he's saying to all Palestinians, Jerusalem is ours, which brings us back to the General Assembly resolution back in, United Nations Security Council resolution 476, 478. It's a united capital for Israel. It seems like this government is adamant to actually ignore all international plights, ignore the negotiations, ignore the Oslo Accords, and carry on with annexing Jerusalem properly, with no Palestinian population, with overall control of the holy sites. You're talking about Al-Aqsa. In addition to the Al-Aqsa, there is also the Christians are suffering in Jerusalem, Palestinian Christians. Their monasteries, there is Deir Sultan occupied next to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. That's been going on for 20 years.
Toby, I want to pick up on your point about the peace negotiations. With Fatah now in the crosshairs because of some of the comments made regarding protecting the Al-Aqsa Mosque, do you see louder calls coming from Israel to prevent the Palestinians' bid for statehood?
I think what we're seeing now is there is obviously a much greater push for recognition of statehood. I think the Palestinian Authority has to be very careful in supporting acts of this kind, and I would hope that the Palestinian Authority would not support acts of this kind, but realise that the only way to move forward is through a proper peace process. But that peace process has to be based on there being accountability. It's very difficult for there to be any real discussions with Israel acting in this way. And I've always made it quite clear that during Operation Protective Edge, there were crimes committed by all sides. And what we have seen, Hamas has accepted that if this matter is referred to the International Criminal Court, its own conduct may come under review as well.
I prayed just last week with Jews, Christians, and Muslims at the Western Wall. They're all free to worship there, and we pray that there will be a peace process soon. We hope all sides come to the table and talk peace for a better future for all peoples.
Thank you very much for that. Gil Hoffman with those final words. Amjad Salfiti and Toby Cadman talking to us on Inside Story. Of course, we'd like to hear from you. So please send us your comments on this topic or other issues. You can also drop us a note at facebook.com/AJ Inside Story or contact us on Twitter. Our handle is at AJ Inside Story and mine at Jane Dutton. From me and the rest of the team, thank you for watching.